now available in paperback and e-readers. Isis, Bride of Dracula. The Goddess Next Door and John Haynes team up to take on the Dark Vampire Lord in this action-packed Isis series adventure. Get Isis, Bride of Dracula in paperback and e-readers at online booksellers today. I was watching a Diversity in Comics video when he was talking about this Make My Milkshake incident, and I looked at the picture of the staffers at Marvel, and I didn't see much diversity. As a black creator, it was sad for me to sit there and see a majority of white females standing in that picture, and one or two black people in that picture, and Tom Beverett. So when I looked at that picture, I saw very little diversity. Moreover, I saw what the real problem was related to Marvel's content. Now, when it relates to Marvel's content these days, Marvel has been in a major sales slump, and it's due, as I see it, due to the lack of diversity in the picture that was titled Make My Milkshake. Moreover, the big problem with that lack of diversity is that most of these young women really do not understand the craft of comic books or the business of comic books. They're all really about pushing a social justice agenda. And when it comes down to agendas, agendas don't sell books. The big problem with all those employees is that they're caught up in their ideals and they don't understand that publishing is a business. And because publishing is a business, your goal is to get profits from sales. And if you don't get profits from sales, you're not going to be in business for long. And when it comes down to your SJW Marvel, they're more about pushing an agenda than running a business. Now, that's a nice idea if you have a nonprofit and you can get yourself some grant money and you can get a grant or two. But when it comes down to the business of publishing, your goal is not to push an agenda. Your goal is to move units. And this is the big problem related to Marvel and the staff they have. They have a large majority female staff, but the big problem with most of that female staff is that they don't understand the craft of comics and they don't understand the business of publishing. Because if you understand the craft of comics and the business of publishing, excuse me, I'm trying to edit a video while I'm making one, you would understand that your goal is to move as many units as possible. And the business practices used by the SJWs at Marvel is alienating people, like doing things like going on social media and attacking people, and those are the type and blocking people. That's the type of stuff that is not going to lead to you getting a lot of sales. Yes, you're pushing your agenda, but you're alienating people to the point where they don't want to listen to your agenda. And when it comes down to these social justice warriors, that's what leads to that's why they're so misguided. They want to push ideas, but they're not really thinking about what their ideas mean to other people or how they execute their ideas in these Marvel comics. Marvel Comics superheroes are commercial characters. And as commercial characters, they have their own mission, they have their own message, and that's what they're designed to be. They're not designed to be pushing political agendas and disingenuous agendas as related to so-called diversity. Because when I look at the SJW characters created as this in Marvel today, I don't really see much diversity. What I really see is a paternalistic agenda by white liberals to push old stereotypes regarding people, not one that creates characters who are themselves and tell their own stories. Because in the old Marvel, yes, there weren't that many characters of color, but the characters of color who were there had a lot more substance. And because they had a lot more substance, when people told stories with those characters, we didn't see their skin color, we saw them as great characters. But when you look at these SJW characters, all we see is their ethnicity, and all they do is promote stereotypes. Because as I look at these comics featuring these characters, they show me a story from a white liberal perspective, which is really paternalistic and out of touch with people, and it really doesn't allow the reader to relate to people as people. No, we see we see stereotypes about culture. We see stereotypes about how white people see people of color, but we don't see people as people. Because when I would read an old school Marvel comic featuring a minority character like a Jim Rhodes or a Black Panther or a Falcon back in the 80s, I used to hear a voice with that character, and I used to be able to relate to that character because they were great characters. These days, when it comes down to people like your Sam Wilson Falcon or a Ta-Nehshi Coates Black Panther, all you get is exposition and dialogue that's really stilted and an agenda. You don't get a character in a story. And that doesn't really add to diversity. All that does is promote stereotypes in the way that many other paternalistic television shows back in the late 70s and early 80s used to do. Now, back in the late 70s, early 80s, we used to have these television shows that were designed to be quote unquote black television shows, like your Diff'rent Strokes, like your Gimme a Break, and your Webster. And these shows, yes, they had black actors in them, but they were extremely paternalistic in their perspective. For example, with Diff'rent Strokes, you had this TV show where the maid who worked for Mr. Drummond died, and she left her sons to Mr. Drummond, this white liberal, and he decides he's going to take care of these two black boys. But the whole tone of the show is racist because it shows you not that he sees these boys as their sons, but actually he sees them as sort of a pet. And that's sort of similar to the purse puppy ideology that they have here at Marvel right now. That's why I say the SJW is the grandson and the granddaughter of the white liberal, because they have the same paternalistic view that I saw on television shows like Diff'rent Strokes, like Gimme a Break, and like Webster, which all they did was repackage the old racist stereotypes in a new, more so-called family-friendly way. And because those stereotypes were repackaged, people couldn't see them unless you really looked long and hard at them. Now, as a black boy growing up in the South Bronx watching these shows, yeah, it was nice to see a black person on TV. But once you saw how this black person was presented on TV, that's what made you angry, because that way that that person was presented did not allow you to see that person as a person. That was what you saw in Diff'rent Strokes was in complete contrast to what you saw on a TV show like The Cosby Show, Family Matters, or Sister Sister. Now, on those shows like Cosby Show, Family Matters, and Sister Sister, you saw people on those shows. You saw characters on those shows, and you saw a balanced and humanized picture of black people on those shows. Now, on Diff'rent Strokes, all you saw was, yes, you saw a black person, but you saw a stereotype. And that's what really I'm seeing with this W Marvel, and their presentation of superheroes. And when I look at the group of people there, I don't see much diversity. And that's the big issue I have had with the comic book industry for the last 25, 30 years, is that you want to talk diversity, but we don't see any people of color. And I looked at that picture and I saw mostly white girls, and that's no different than having the industry be mostly white males. And that's why the industry is in trouble right now, because they're not looking to hire a qualified person to fill the job in comic book writing, someone who understands the Marvel universe, understands the characters at Marvel, someone who has taken the time to sit there and read a run of characters or stories featuring a character, or sit there and read 2 or 3 volumes of a character's adventures to get a sense of them. No, instead of doing that, what they'd rather do is try to create some sort of diversity version of this character, because what they want to do is deflect from their lack of creative skills and the fact that they have not gone out here and done the long, hard research on this character. Now, someone like myself who has aspired to be a comic book writer, I've sat there and I've read official handbook of the Marvel Universe and read the backgrounds of these characters. I've followed it up with Wikipedia synopsises, and I've even looked at some of the comics so I can get a sense of the character's voice, the character's story, and the character's mission and how it's changed over time. Moreover, I've read many of Stan Lee's books on comics, like Origins of Marvel Comics, Son of Origins, and Superhero Women, so I could understand, what inspired Stan Lee to create these characters, where Stanley got his ideas for these characters, and to get an understanding of Marvel Comics and the mission as it related to Stan Lee. And I've also read the histories of people like Jack Kirby. So when I lit and people like Steve Ditko. So I've read about all those different guys and how they contributed to comics. And I look at the people at SJW Marvel, and I bet if I were to ask them, a couple of hard questions, they wouldn't be able to answer them. Like, what is this character's mission? What did that creator intend with that character? And where do they want to go with that character? Or have you even read, some of the seminal runs in comics? Because when I look at these comics that people like Captain Cummings and Diversity in Comics put in their videos, it's clear to me that the people writing Marvel Comics, one, don't care about the characters, two, don't care about the stories, and three, have not done the research. They're just there for a paycheck, and they talk about, what really upsets me about them is that they sit there disingenuously talking about, making the Marvel Universe more diverse, and here you have a group of white females replacing white males, a couple of beta males supporting them, and customers not getting quality comics out of the experience. For them, it's all about pushing agendas, not promoting Marvel Comics and promoting Marvel Comics as a brand to reach new readers. When I came into comics and I came wanting to be a comic book writer, I wanted to make sure that these characters would be preserved for the next generation. And that was one of the things I aspired to do as a teenager, was make sure that I continued to maintain quality stories. But I look at the people at SJW Marvel, they don't have that passion, they don't have that heart, and they're really dishonest because they're talking about diversity, but you don't see any black people in those pictures outside of one or two, and you don't see any other people of color, but they're sitting there saying they're going to be writing stories featuring people of color. And when they do write stories featuring people of color, they don't have any voice, they don't have any story, and all they're doing is pushing the same dysfunctional, paternalistic agenda that the producers of TV shows like Diff'rent Strokes and Webster used to push back in the 70s and the 80s, because that's what people are getting today at Marvel, and that's why no one wants to buy the comics, because they know that this isn't authentic, this is not a Marvel character. It doesn't capture the mission. It doesn't tell the mission of Marvel Comics, nor does it capture the spirit of the characters. And instead of us getting actual diversity, all we're getting is white supremacy repackaged with a feminist agenda and a social justice warrior agenda and a liberal agenda that does not give us a diversity of voices, a diversity of opinions, and a diversity of ideas that show us how really diverse the Marvel Universe is. I will take any character that they don't want to use and see them in a comic rather than these affirmative action heroes like America Chavez that they want to shove at me, or this Sam Wilson Falcon, or this Ta-Negro Coates as Black Panther. I would take any of the other characters that they seem to ignore, like your Battle Stars, like your Silver Claws, like your Living Lightnings. They don't want to talk about those characters because you have to actually do research on those characters' histories in order to use them. And it's clear to me that many of the SJW staff, these young people, they don't want to go out here and do that hard work in crafting a quality comic for readers. And because they don't want to do that work in crafting comics, that's why their sales are at an all-time low. And it's eventually going to reach a point where there is going to be as I call it, a house cleaning, because again, publishing is a business, and if you are not in business to make profits, what's going to happen to you is that you are either going to go out of business, or if you're a part of a major corporation, there's going to be a major shakeup with the entire staff. No one is unfireable when the numbers reach a certain level, and top executives look at a division and see the sales at an all-time low. If you'd like to see me make more videos about the comic book industry, you can donate to my Patreon by clicking the link in the description box. And if you want to try some of my SJS Direct Universe titles, which feature black characters in a positive perspective and a balanced perspective, you may do so by clicking the link to Amazon.com in the description box. That's all I have to say for this video. You can comment, rate, and subscribe.